All right, let's get right into it. We're going to explore some of the most powerful and honestly most dangerous ideas from the last couple of centuries. We're talking about ideas that literally fuel resentment, that are built on deceit, and that come from a place of shocking arrogance. But more importantly, we're going to look at the way out of these psychological traps. To really get this, we can't just talk theory. We have to start with a story, a real one. This is from a young man who came up to the author of our source material. Just imagine that for a second. Going from homeless, fresh out of prison, to having a family, a job, a home, in 2 years? That's not just a change, that's a total transformation.
So that really begs the question, right? What on earth could you say to someone in that situation that could spark that kind of turnaround? It's not what you'd expect. It's not about what you're owed or what your rights are. No, it's something way, way deeper than that.
And here it is, the one thing the author found after speaking to hundreds of thousands of people that could make a massive audience go completely silent was responsibility. Not rights, not what you deserve, but the idea of picking up a heavy load and carrying it properly. That simple idea is the key. But to understand why that one word is so powerful right now, we have to zoom out a bit.
So why are we so susceptible to these easy and, let's be honest, often destructive ideas? Well, it's not a new thing. The roots go way back to a massive crisis of belief that started brewing in the 19th century. And this isn't some dusty history lesson, okay? This stuff sets the stage for everything we're dealing with right now.
Okay, so you've probably heard this one before, right? God is dead. But here's the thing almost everyone gets wrong. When Nietzsche said that, he wasn't celebrating. He was terrified. He was basically screaming a warning from the rooftops that the moral foundation of Western civilization was crumbling, and he knew that something awful would rush in to fill that vacuum. It was a cry of despair.
And wow, were they right. This timeline lays it out pretty starkly. You have these brilliant minds in the 19th century basically predicting disaster. And then, bam, the 20th century happens with tens of millions dead at the hands of these new systems. And the scary part? The underlying problem, that crisis of meaning, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's just shapeshifted for our times.
So here's the bottom line. They saw two terrifying roads opening up. Path number one, total despair, nihilism. The crushing feeling that life is pointless, that nothing matters. Path number two is maybe even scarier. It's the trap of totalitarian ideology, a human-made system that pretends to be God, that pretends to have all the answers.
All right, so let's zoom in on that second path, ideology. All those isms you hear about. They're basically the modern-day monsters that those guys were warning us about. And what's wild is that they're often just a very fancy, intellectual-sounding recipe for deceit.
So what are we actually talking about when we say ideology? Think of it like this. It's a theory that claims to have the answer for everything. It takes our messy, complicated world and shoves it into a neat little box with a simple label. And it almost always points the finger at one single thing as the root of all evil.
And there's actually a recipe for cooking one up. You can see it here. First, you start with some big, fuzzy concepts. Then, and this part is absolutely key, you need a bad guy. You have to identify a villain. You pick one single idea like power or money, and you make it the magic key that unlocks all of history. And the final step? If anyone dares to question your perfect theory, well, they're not just wrong, they're evil.
And this isn't just theory. Look at this. This Soviet poster, it's horrifying. It's that recipe put into practice. In our collective farm, there's no place for priests and kulaks. Step 2, identify the villain. Done. And who were the kulaks? They were just successful farmers. But the ideology needed an enemy, so it painted them as the problem. And that justified what came next, which was pure horror.
Now, this next point is so important. It's easy to think, oh, an ideologue is just like a religious fundamentalist, but they're not. There's a huge difference. A genuinely religious person, you could argue, submits to a mystery that they can't fully grasp. That forces some humility. The ideologue? Oh no. They think their theory explains it all. No mystery, no humility. Just the absolute arrogance of knowing everything. And that is incredibly dangerous.
Okay, so ideology provides the smart-sounding excuse for hate. But what's the emotional engine? What actually powers it? What makes people buy in? Well, it's a really toxic, corrosive emotion, resentment.
There's a specific word for it, actually, ressentiment. And it's way more than just being jealous. It's this whole twisted mindset where you look at your own life, your own shortcomings, and instead of looking in the mirror, you point outside.
You say, it's the system's fault, it's their fault. And you start to see successful people as villains who must have cheated to get where they are.
It's like a psychological magic trick. It takes that ugly, shameful feeling of envy and it transforms it into a noble fight for justice. All of a sudden, your bitterness feels righteous. Your desire to see someone else fail feels like a moral obligation. The world gets split into good guys, that's us, and bad guys, that's them. And suddenly, you have permission to hate.
And this is really the core difference, isn't it? The ideological view is always, the problem is out there. It's them, it's the system. But the much harder, much truer psychological view, the one that someone like Alexander Solzhenitsyn learned in the Gulag, is that the line between good and evil, it cuts right through every single human heart, including our own.
So, okay, we've talked about the trap. Ideology, resentment, it's a nasty combination. So how do you get out? Well, the answer isn't to find a better ideology. The answer is to completely change your focus, to stop looking out there and start looking in here. It's all about the path of humility.
This is it. This is the antidote. This is the idea that made those crowds go silent. And it's so simple, but it's so profound. Before you dare try to fix the world, with all its unbelievable complexity, first, you have to fix yourself. Start with the problems you can actually do something about, the ones right in front of you.
This quote just nails it. Stop pointing fingers at the world. Point the finger at yourself first. Start with the assumption that maybe, just maybe, you're the problem. That your own flaws are the piece of the world's mess that you are actually responsible for. And yeah, that's humbling, but wow, is it empowering. So what does that actually look like day to day? Well, it starts right here, with a serious dose of humility. Just admit it. You don't know everything. In fact, you barely know anything. That right there is the total opposite of the ideologue's arrogance.
Next step, do something about it. Start small. Stop doing the things you know are wrong, the things that make you feel weak and ashamed. Start doing the things you know you should be doing. Stop just talking about how the world should be and actually make your little corner of it better.
And then, shoulder some real responsibility. Find something to carry. Pick something productive, something that helps someone, your family, your community, and just commit to doing it well. That's it. That is where real, solid meaning comes from. The kind of meaning that makes you immune to all this other toxic stuff.
And you know what happens when you start doing all that? When you focus on you, your flaws, your actions, your responsibilities? You automatically leave ideology behind. You can't do both. You're trading in that arrogant, resentful quest to fix everyone else for the much harder but much more honest job of fixing yourself.
Which brings us to the big, final question. Once you throw out those easy answers, once you get rid of that poison of resentment, what's left? There's a void, right? And it's up to you to fill it. With what? With responsibility, with humility, with truth. And what you decide to build right there, in that space, starting with you, well, that might just be the most important thing you ever do.